Welcome back to Project 613. Today we are going to learn about the prohibition of carrying on Shabbat. The mitzvah that the verse tells us is Lo ta'aseh kol melacha. It is forbidden for us to do any work on Shabbat. Now, as we've already learned, this is a reference to all the 39 categories of forbidden work on Shabbat. One of which is the prohibition of carrying outdoors or from indoors to outdoors, or from outdoors to indoors on Shabbat. How do we know this? Because as mentioned, the types of forbidden work on Shabbat is any activity that went into the construction or the preparation of the construction of the sanctuary in the desert. And one of the things that the Jewish people had to do in preparation for building the sanctuary was bringing their materials, their contributions from their own homes, from their own tents to the public domain where the sanctuary was being constructed. And therefore, since this is one of the things that was done in constructing the sanctuary, it is therefore included in the 39 types of forbidden work on Shabbat. There are a number of unique things about this, one of the 39 categories. Firstly, although all the 39 are things that were done in the construction of the sanctuary, nevertheless, we do not have explicit verses for the vast majority of them that define them and tell us what exactly was done. Rather, we know by way of tradition all the specific things that were done in preparation for building the sanctuary, and that's how we know what's not allowed on Shabbat. But when it comes to carrying, there is actually a specific explicit verse that describes how the Jewish people were bringing the materials and were doing work for the preparation for the building of the sanctuary, and then they stopped for Shabbat. And the words that the Torah chooses to use when it describes stopping the work for Shabbat actually is that they stopped carrying, that they stopped bringing those materials on Shabbat. So it's unique in the fact that we have an explicit verse that describes this as one of the forbidden activities on Shabbat. And at the same time, on the flip side, it's unique that the sages of the Talmud already acknowledge that this form of forbidden work is different than all the others in the fact that they call it a melacha grua. It's an inferior type of work. In other words, it's not something that we can really understand why it would be forbidden. The other types of forbidden work, we can somewhat understand the person is achieving something, he's accomplishing something. We can understand why it would be considered work, even though it may not be extreme labor. But as mentioned previously, there's a certain creative element going on in the other types of forbidden work where some significant change is happening to something. But when it comes to carrying, it's actually much more difficult to understand, and that's why the Talmud acknowledges that. And nevertheless, it's considered forbidden on Shabbat. And the interesting thing is that a big percentage of the laws of Shabbat revolve around understanding and describing the details of this specific prohibition of not carrying outdoors on Shabbat. Different scenarios, the difference between carrying or throwing from indoors to outdoors and from outdoors to indoors, and the exact distance, and what happens if two people do it together, and so on. And there are so many details in the tractate of Shabbat and in the Shulchan Aruch discussing this specific law. There is something else unique about this mitzvah, and that is the concept of an Eruv, and we will discuss more about that in tomorrow's video. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.